Hey philosophers! Today you'll get kind of a 2-for-1 in that I'll be giving a philosophy lesson, but also I'll be getting a little personal with you. I'll be sharing my own personal anecdotes and stories and philosophy. And I hope to do that a lot more in my following videos as well. So I'll start by giving an easy epistemology lesson on beliefs. Wait, what's epistemology? It sounds like a disease. Doctor, do I have epistemology? Yeah, unfortunately, the diagnosis is epistemology. It's actually philosophy of knowledge. So what we believe, what we can know, etc. This part is going to be like philosophy. So if at any point you want to skip to the more fun part, aka my personal stories, you can do that because I'll provide a timestamp below. So once those concepts in epistemology are established, I'm going to introduce, on the basis of that, philosopher Alvin Plantinga's argument that belief in the existence of God can be rational. So this is not really an argument about whether that belief is true, although it's obviously related, but really more about whether it's rationally justified. So can an intelligent and analytical person hold it in good faith? This is actually quite controversial because a lot of people believe that belief in God is irrational. And then really the latter half of the video, the highlight, is me philosophizing about my own journey in theistic belief. And it combines both my own philosophy with examples and also personal stories and anecdotes that make me feel vulnerable inside with all of you. I currently hold the belief that this video will be very fun and thought-provoking for a lot of you, but I don't know. We'll see whether that belief holds. Alright, let's begin with the philosophy lesson. Usually, we tend to think of beliefs as having some support that you can articulate, like an argument. So for example, I believe that I was born on December 24th based on propositions like the hospital records show so, the government records show so, and they are both reliable sources. I also believe that my cat is currently healthy, and I base that belief on propositions like my vet told me so, and my vet has reliable credentials. But today, we're going to think of a very special kind of belief called basic belief. So basic belief is a proposition you believe without basing it on other propositions. So more easily said, it's something you believe without having an argument for it. You might think, shouldn't we try to not have basic beliefs? Are those even okay? I mean, aren't all basic beliefs irrational? Well, think about this. If you keep basing your proposition on another proposition, like, I believe this because of that, and this because of that, I mean, it's gonna go on forever. So there has to be some start or, I guess, end point. And those are basic beliefs. But wait, maybe you think there can be other structures for beliefs that don't require basic beliefs. Leave a comment below in that case. But this particular model, where non-basic beliefs depend on basic beliefs, meaning basic beliefs provide the foundation for non-basic beliefs, this model is called Foundationalism. And its historical adherents include Plato, Aristotle, Aquinas, Descartes, Leibniz, Locke, and Chisholm. Okay, so what are some examples of basic beliefs? Good question. Well, one is 1 + 1 = 2. So did you get to believe that 1 + 1 is 2 on the basis of an argument? No, right? You understand it to be true. So are all math basic? No. I mean, based on this basic belief of 1 + 1 is 2, it yields multiplications that are non-basic because they depend on your belief that 1 + 1 is 2. Another example, I feel pain in my back. You don't believe this because you have some argument for it either. But note that if you really wanted to, though, you could provide an argument for it for the sake of it. It doesn't have to be impossible for someone to provide an argument for their basic belief. In this example, I am very good at locating pain in my body. I can't provide any other argument, but Yeah, so I provided something, right? But the important thing is that this argument wasn't necessary when I formed the belief that I have back pain. And that's why it's still a basic belief. So now that we know what basic belief is, let's move on to a really important question. What qualifies as rationally justified basic belief? So rationally justified basic belief is also called properly basic belief. So I'm going to be calling them properly basic beliefs from now on. Just as non-basic beliefs can be rational or irrational, basic beliefs can also be rationally justified or not. I mean, it's very possible that someone holds some belief that they don't have an argument for. So for them, then that must be a basic belief. Okay, so maybe an example is, maybe someone believes that they are a god. I know, extreme. But, and when asked why or what argument they have for it, maybe they don't have any. It's the basic belief they have. They just believe it. It's evident to them. Okay, it's a basic belief, but it's obviously not rationally justified. So as you can imagine, there's no easy answer to what makes a belief a properly basic belief. But people who are known as classical foundationalists have taken a stab at it. They believe that for a basic belief to be a proper one, it has to be either self-evident or evident to the senses, and also incorrigible, meaning it just can't be defeated. So it's a pretty tight standard. Now it is time to bring up philosopher Alvin Plantinga, a philosopher that I greatly admire, who is still living, an analytical philosopher, and sometimes called the philosopher of God. So he thought that classical foundationalism is wrong. Here's one argument he offers. Okay, remember that the classical foundationalist's belief is that properly basic beliefs have to be self-evident, incorrigible, evident to the senses. But that belief itself is not self-evident, evident to the senses, or incorrigible. So it can't be a properly basic belief according to itself. Nor does it, Plantinga's thought, have any other good argument for it. So that belief can't be rationally justified according to its own standard. So in technical terms, classical foundationalism is self-referentially inconsistent. So Plantinga revised classical foundationalism, and in some ways, he provided more ways for beliefs to be properly basic. And it'd be too much for today's video to go over the entirety of his argument, so I'll skip that for now. The more important thing I wanted to mention is that he argued that belief in God is a properly basic belief. He says that it is, quote, entirely acceptable, desirable, right, proper, and rational to accept belief in God without any argument or evidence whatever. So he thought that belief in God is basic, and such a basic belief in God is not inferential, it doesn't depend on other propositions, but rather a direct one. So he believed that not only is belief in God a basic one, but that it is rationally justified. I know that a lot of people are eager to hear why. One aspect that I'll shortly offer is this thing called sensus divinitatis, which is a kind of faculty that some philosophers believe that humans possess that allow them to perceive and understand that God exists. So the ability to look at the world, to live their lives, and realize that God must exist. I know this doesn't satisfy a lot of you, and I know some of you are thinking, doesn't that kind of thinking justify many other beliefs too that may be ridiculous? Yeah, so one day in another video, I really hope to cover more of Plantinga's argument in depth. But for today, I just really wanted to introduce and build up to the idea that some philosophers believe that belief in God doesn't need an argument for it to be rationally justified. Why did I want to establish this and bring this topic up? Because this is a topic that I've struggled with personally for a really long time. And I wanted to share with you what that journey has been like. So here begins the hopefully fun part. So I first experienced God when I was 12. And then I had pretty steady faith until freshman year at Stanford, at which point I was challenged by really some of the smartest atheists, both professors and students, that I had ever met. Combine that with many atheist philosophers I was studying at the time, like Mill, Nietzsche, Marx, Freud, it really made it imperative for me to think really seriously about whether my belief was justified. And me being me, I decided to have a trial period where I try not believing in God and see what that teaches me. And at the end of that, guess what? I was no longer a Christian. I had concluded that a lot of religious experiences that I had did not require the existence of God. But interestingly enough, I was compelled back after several years. Long story short, within the past 10 years, I was Christian, then not, then Christian again, several times over, and you can probably imagine it was very emotionally exhausting, emotionally and intellectually. So why didn't I just stay Christian? Why did I have to change my identity and struggle so much? I think that I was kind of a perfectionist. I didn't like being something and not fully embodying it. Um, yeah, I think that's a big reason. And I also used to think that if I have doubts that are substantial enough, then really my belief isn't really belief, and that my identity as a Christian and such doubts cannot coexist. So after all those experiences, where am I now? Okay, so right now is possibly the weakest and strongest I've been in my identity as a Christian, if that makes any sense whatsoever. In that it's strong because despite how weak it is, I hold on to it. In that I acknowledge and entertain fully my doubts and unresolved issues with Christianity. And at the same time, I know that the data I've gathered over my life, whether it be intellectual or experiential, suggest for me that God exists. So now I think that believing that something is true does not mean there is zero evidence to the contrary that I'm aware of. It's really about weighing and understanding such evidence. Maybe this sounds obvious to you, but for me, it's been difficult to fully actually believe that. So I thought of an example, you guys. So say that you went to the mountains and saw a tiger, okay? And you come back and you tell your neighbors or villagers or whatever, and all the villagers say that you must be wrong because there hasn't been a tiger in decades. Now that's certainly evidence against what you saw, right? That's evidence against it. But it might just not be very strong. Maybe not enough to overturn your newly formed belief. But say that you go on to do some scientific research and find out that a tiger simply cannot exist in that climate or the constitution of the mountain. This may be stronger evidence, but you might also think, well, my belief isn't that the tiger lives there or has lived there. It's just that it was there when I saw it. And so your beliefs may become more refined in that way. And maybe a friend who saw that tiger with you holds a slightly different belief. That the tiger actually has lived there for at least a month, depending on their own experiences with the tiger. Maybe they saw it multiple times over the past month. And finally, whether you keep your belief at a certain point in time would also depend on things like your memory, like how fast it fades, and when you discover that your eyesight isn't as good as you thought, how long it's been since your experience, how important it is for you that you saw that tiger. But then, if you were to see the tiger again when you go to the mountain, or see some other scientific research that suggests maybe the tiger lives there, or can live there for that matter, I don't know, it might also strengthen or otherwise modify your belief. Obviously, a tiger being in a mountain is more plausible maybe in the first place than some spiritual experience for some people, but still you guys get the analogy, right? Even though it might not be a perfect one. And I have accepted that this is a kind of process and that I can hold my belief in the existence of God throughout my discovery of contrary evidence or unresolved problems, if I also have enough built up in me to dispel those and maybe only allow them to refine or reinterpret the specific elements of my belief. Okay, so I know that people ask, like, well, if I had a religious experience, I wouldn't trust that. I think that I was hallucinating or something, so how can you trust yours? To that, I really like Notre Dame philosopher Robert Audy's response. He says, quote, this is all quote, "No one could say that a single or even repeated instances of a certain experience should be intellectually compelling for someone with no other indications." And I think that's very well put. It's a combination of different experiences and arguments that make someone's belief in God altogether rational in a lot of cases, I think. And so I went ahead, obviously, and thought about what constitutes mine. So what makes my belief in God rational. So I have to start by admitting that wishful thinking definitely is one. I'm not going to deny that. However, the interesting thing, and I'm just speaking the truth here, is that I have wishful thinking both ways. To the extent that I can't tell which one I wish for more. You might say, how can you as a Christian say that? You can't be a real Christian and think that, or anyway. So of course, at this point of my life, I wish God exists. I mean, I believe that God exists, and I also wish that he does. Those are two different things. You can believe that a certain person exists, but wish that he or she doesn't, right? Well, right now I wish God exists. But that's because I've invested in my relationship with him. Like, obviously I would feel bad if someone I thought loved me unconditionally turns out not to exist. But I'm talking about kind of coming from a more neutral place. At those phases in my life when I was not holding the belief in the existence of God, I really wasn't at all wishing that God exists. I really wasn't. I know that for a lot of people it's different. Sometimes they can't get themselves to believe in God, but they wish that a good God exists. But not for me. My desire not to have a God in my life provided good enough reason for my wishful thinking, for the existence of God not to activate and take over. I liked not having to struggle with moral choices any further than I had to using my own ethical principles and philosophizing. In other words, when I carefully decide what is right or wrong, I didn't want to have a second higher authority to check off on it. What if that contradicts with my own analysis? That's just trouble. That's just a lot of work. So that's just one of the many reasons I liked not having God in my life and wanted to keep it that way. But I do distinctly remember when I first decided I was an atheist more than a decade ago, I vowed to myself that I'm going to be more moral than I had ever been in my life because I could not stand feeling like my morality depended on something outside of myself, that it wasn't self-generated. Walking down memory lane. Anyway, so I think I took a detour talking about one factor for my belief in God, wishful thinking. But I think the video has gone on for way too long and people won't watch it if I keep going. So please look forward to another video for me to discuss the rest of the factors. Cliffhanger. All right then, have a Philosophical week. Bye.